Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? As mentioned, my name is Shawn Cheng. I help to lead investments for Consensys Mesh. I have the honor and privilege to do a little fireside with Sergey from Chainlink today. Yeah, I've been in the space for about 7 years, helping to do investments and working on products up and down the tech stack, and obviously have witnessed the power of Chainlink, and I'm really excited to sit down together and talk a little bit about the role of RWAs in the space and how it will help to drive mass adoption. So give a round of applause for Sergey today.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Sergey from Chainlink. Most of you probably know what we do, but we're the largest provider of data into blockchains. At this point, I think it's both public and private. And the RWAs are very heavily powered by data, and the more complicated and traditional finance-based an RWA gets, the more data it needs for compliance, accounting, and various other reasons. So I feel like we're pretty involved in the RWA industry, and we'll be more and more involved.
Hello. Well, great. Why don't we start off with an easy one? And what are some of the key benefits to tokenizing real-world assets? So we've obviously got a gamut of audience members today and folks that will want to know about what are some of the key things that you're thinking about how tokenization will help drive adoption. But yeah, we'd love to kind of lay the foundation there.
Yeah, so there's two key benefits, pretty different. One is opening up new markets. So if you tokenize something, generally the question that people in TradFi and probably the people in DeFi should be asking is, how does this create a new market? So what is the new market demand that's going to exist because a financial product or an asset has been tokenized into an RWA that didn't exist because the product existed in a traditional form? It's a really easy answer when the product didn't exist at all, right? So this is a lot of the fractional ownership use cases, like you couldn't own a piece of a building. Now you can own a piece of a building. So it's pretty obvious what the market there is. It's whoever would want to own a piece of a building. So it's pretty clear, right? The thing that's not clear always is what is the additional market that's created when you take existing inventory, existing financial products, and make them tokenized. That's usually a more complicated analysis where you have to consider who the end user is, who the end consumer is, but that market clearly exists because even tokenized money market funds have very large amounts of demand. So I think that's the first piece of value. The second piece of value is all the efficiency gains. So the way that tokenized funds work is, in my opinion, already more efficient. The efficiency gains are on a very wide spectrum. You have, the settlement speed, like atomic settlement versus multi-day stuff. You have the speed of redemption. So NAV calculations in funds often happen a month or a bi-weekly basis. But we, for example, have gone live on production with Fidelity International and Signum to put NAV on chain, pretty often. And so you can take the redemption period from a month to a minute or less, depending on how often you want to calculate the NAV. And then there's a whole bunch of other efficiencies about the paying agent, the NAV calculation agent, the transfer agent, a whole bunch of very esoteric back office type stuff that boils down to better economics and better products. That efficiency thesis is actually very, very strong in the tokenized fund world. So it's both of these things. When you get a product that has both of these things in one, that's really powerful because you have the kind of market demand driving the interest in the product, and then the product can also be better. So it's not just tokenization and the fact that it's on chain. It's the fact that it's on chain and that it has all these efficiency benefits. So you've actually made a better financial product, and you have the benefit of having it on chain for the global kind of blockchain people. So I would say there's two distinct categories, and just every single thing you look at, that's the analysis I do. I'm like, is there a market? Any efficiency gains? No market, no efficiency gains. Not really. No, thank you. Market efficiency gains, yes. Sounds good. Any one of those, both of those, really good. full steam ahead.
Yeah, I think, to take it another step further, Chainlink has been, synonymous with price oracles. It's continued to expand and innovate on things like verifiable randomness. This year, congratulations on launching things like CCIP and really pushing cross-chain innovation forward. In the world of RWAs, what is the role of Chainlink? What do you feel like are the key elements that Chainlink helps to drive in the world around RWAs?
So generally, Chainlink does, the Chainlink community and the set of protocols tend to do two things on an industry level. The first things they do is usually allowing people to launch new products successfully. So for example, Aave was able to launch with Chainlink because Chainlink provided the first Oracle networks that were reliable enough to allow lending markets to appear. Before Chainlink Oracle networks went live, the total DeFi space was sub 100 million in TVL, scattered between like 10 to 20 teams. Literally, that's the amount of teams that were around. We know because we knew all of them. And then with Chainlink powering the majority of DeFi, even up to this day, DeFi grew to over 200 billion and is now back in the 90 to 120 billion category range. So the first thing that Chainlink does is it makes new Oracle networks possible and available. And those new Oracle networks allow new smart contracts to come into existence. In DeFi, this was lending markets, some of the early derivatives markets, and so on. In RWAs, it's tokenized funds, mainly through initially NAV, and it's proof of reserves, right? So Chainlink has been the longest time provider and most widely used provider of proof of reserves. And now, from what I can tell, we're the most widely used provider of NAV. And there's been independent analysis by, I think Sentiment are their name, or something like that. You can find them on Twitter, where they analyzed all the GitHub repos, and they looked at the technology that was most widely used in the most RWA repos, and Chainlink was number one. Basically because the Chainlink community provides the first version of many services, right? This is one of the things that I think the Chainlink community and the protocol does well, is the first really reliable service. The second thing that Chainlink does is provide a up-level, a step up, sometimes orders of magnitude increase in the amount of security. So that's what we're doing, for example, for a cross-chain. So the Chainlink set of protocols have been live on production for over 5 years. And in those 5 years, they've been up, and they've kept user value secure. And that's basically continuing and now expanding into cross-chain as of last year. And what we see is the same reason that people switched off of very poor quality data oracles in the early days of DeFi is the same reason people are switching to CCIP, which is mainly the security guarantees. So the first stage in a lot of these things is how do you provide a piece of data or an oracle network that allows something to be possible that wasn't possible before. NAV is a good example. Proof of reserve is a good example. Identity oracles are a good example for the more kind of regulated RWAs that are going to come, and then a bunch of other Oracle networks that provide new capabilities. And then the next level is how do you increase the security of the services that went live, and how do you make better security for the space in general so that it can hold much more value? Because generally security and reliability and tamper-proofness has one value when the amount secured by a system is low, and it has a very different value when the amount secured by a system is high, because as the value goes up, the system or your protocol or your RWAs or your tokenized fund becomes a larger and larger target, right? So this is why, generally speaking, the majority of DeFi and the majority of most users in most chains that we're on, most places where Chainlink services go live migrate to Chainlink. It's because as they become more successful, they look at the actual security guarantees, like rather than what it says on the box, they like look in the box and like, how does this other thing work? How does the thing that we have in-house work? And they realize, yeah, I mean, I don't want this securing $10 billion. I don't feel good about that. And so they do an analysis and they look at the architecture and they decide, for very good reasons, the Chainlink Oracle networks are the most secure option. So it's both those initial use cases, and then as the industry and as the use cases grow, it's giving them the security they need to continue to grow. Because if you don't have that security, you can't continue growth, right? The story of our industry is growth, security issue, growth goes down. So far, because Chainlink hasn't had any security issues, the growth of many things has been able to continue, right? So this is kind of what, what role we play, and I think we'll continue to play. A very good example in the RWA world is NAV data. So we're right now providing that on production, both for smaller protocols and for folks like Fidelity, and we'll be providing it for other large folks in the coming months. I think NAV is the first big category of RWA data, but proof of reserves is close behind.
That's great. A lot of people in this room are involved with a variety of approaches for how the space around RWAs is going to continue to grow and proliferate. I think many people might consider on-chain or native approaches really interesting, but there's also a lot of adoption from key partners that you guys have helped to broker from the traditional finance space. So how do you see traditional finance converging with RWAs? If you were to paint a picture around how these worlds that seem very, very different kind of come together, what do you think that kind of looks like over the next couple of years?
So there's like two funny things with this. The first one is that it's actually converging right here, like right in this part of the whole industry. So when I talk to people from the real world asset space, they're like, yeah, used to work at Goldman, left, run an RWA thing. Used to work at Blackstone, left, run an RWA thing. It's like the most common history of most of a lot of the people that make these RWA things, because it's the RWA thing being useful in a way that they're used to it being useful. It's not about, let's make a thing that we say has a value because we buy and sell it, which is what a cryptocurrency is, right? It's like we make TV coin and you and me buy and sell TV coin and it acquires a price, and then, that's kind of how the financial markets work, but a lot of the financial markets work against real world things. So I think the really interesting thing is that the TradFi world and the public blockchain world are intersecting like literally at this place. Like this room probably has the most people that are going to be at that intersecting point in a valuable, useful way over the next 3 or 4 years. And it's actually really great because it's like this smaller community where everybody's just focused on building something really good, which is what I really like and what the whole crypto industry was like in the beginning. So I'm just thrilled to be part of this community. It's just something I always enjoy, being part of communities at this stage before the next stages, which I won't tell you about. Let's just enjoy this stage for now. And then the second funny thing is that there's been this recurring theme of the banks are going to come, the banks are going to come, the banks are going to come for years, right? There's like every cycle the banks are going to come, it's going to be a big deal, and then they don't come, right? They don't come over and they don't do anything, and people are like, it's all bullshit. The banks and the asset managers aren't going to be involved, and crypto is going to kill them, and we're going to murder. Let's murder. Yeah, that's not really that likely. What's more likely is it's going to be, it is now, like the internet, right? Like the people on this stage just now before me, how many times did they say BlackRock, right? BlackRock, Larry, BlackRock, every other, why, right? Why? Because BlackRock's not going to die because of this. BlackRock is going to get ahead of this. They're going to make more money, just like they did with the internet, right? So that's what's going to happen, right? It's just like the internet. There are firms that emerged because of the internet, and they competed and did well. Then there are firms that adopted the internet that were existing firms, and they competed and did well. And there are firms that ignored the internet, and they didn't compete, and they didn't do well. So that's the same situation here. If that's kind of the evolution of this, then the question is, who has the liquidity, who has the money, who has the ability to be compatible with various legal frameworks. On all those dimensions, the traditional markets have a very significant advantage, right? The advantage they don't have is they don't have the ability to make cool new things quickly that create real economic benefit quickly. Like they can't do it quickly. They have to do it slowly and sometimes they can't do it at all because the regulator won't approve it. So it'll be a mix of BlackRock and whoever else like BlackRock, Fidelity or whoever, generating, I think, a lot of the value that flows into RWAs, and then the permissionless innovation, which by the way I completely believe in and is like a great thing, the whole permissionless innovation thesis is exactly what the world needs and what we're a part of and what we need. It's a great thing. That whole permissionless innovation group of people, which is, by the way, like this great group of people, will generate the cooler, newer, more yield-bearing, more exciting configurations of things. And then I think the value from the TradFi people will flow into those things as a form of collateral or as a user, right? So the world isn't going to be DeFi kills TradFi or RWAs kill TradFi. The world is going to be TradFi becomes the biggest user of DeFi and RWAs. And therefore, you know, Larry Fink is the best, BlackRock's the best, right? Because they're your user, right? Like if you asked people about these institutions a year ago and you said, everybody would have been largely on the same page, it's not good, right? We don't like them, we're replacing them. Now everyone's like, we like them. They're a user of ours, because they're your user. You can't not like your user if you're sane, right? Doesn't work to not like your user. And they have all the money, right? So they have all of the users, like the big ones, like the hundreds of trillions of dollars. So I think the retail demand will grow. That might get the whole crypto industry to like maybe 10 billion, probably closer to 7 or 8 or something at the high end. And then the rest of the value will have to flow in from these regulated institutional places. And the ones that adopt this are going to do well, and the ones that don't adopt this will do worse. But I would view them as a user base. I wouldn't view them as something you have to kill. I would view it like a group of people and a lot of value that you want flowing into your system. And I would start evaluating the conditions under which they flow that value into a system. You know, identity conditions, accounting conditions, like what are the requirements that money has to make its way into your system? Like what's that checklist of stuff? That's kind of how I would see it, because there's like another flip side to that. If you ignore all those users and all that value, and that value does flow into the RWA industry, and it flows into places other than your system, on a competitive basis, that's not good for your system, whatever your system is, assuming it depends on TVL and money coming into it, right? So you're kind of in a position where you have to capture the user base that has the most value. And I think now kind of the race has started. I think like they shot a gun in the air and the race has begun. Fidelity's in, other people are in. So all that value is coming on chain. And I would find ways to interact with it productively, which, not surprisingly, Chainlink can help you with, because CCIP is becoming the standard for secure, reliable cross-chain in both the Web3 world and in the capital markets. So our goal is actually to have a standard that both the DeFi people, RWA people can use, and the capital markets TradFi people use. And if they're both on that same standard, like for example for price or the rails to send value to each other, then it's very natural for them to transact with each other, right? If both the TradFi and the DeFi protocol are on CCIP, they can send value to each other and do a transaction. If they're both relying on Chainlink price as the definitive reliable price, they can both settle. There's not a lot of work that needs to go into that transaction anymore, because you're all on the same standard, basically. That's the body of work that we're involved in.
Cannot underscore the value of shared standards between both the old world and the new. We're seeing fantastic tailwinds as it relates to a lot of these major players kind of coming to the table. I do want to ask, though, what do you think are the main barriers to both customers and users as well as more volume? What are some of the barriers that you think are going to be most relevant for us to keep in mind this coming year? And are there other barriers that come to mind that we should be mindful of as we continue to build?
So in the RWA DeFi world, I think I would say it's user experience. I think the whole private key management thing doesn't really work super well still. And there isn't like a secure element in my phone that handles everything the right way or like in a way that's super easy to use. Some people have tried to make some phones to do that. User experience isn't great. That's holding back crypto in general. RWA is a part of crypto. Not a good thing for the Web3 DeFi people because the Web3 DeFi people are acquiring net new users, right? And when you acquire net new users, the friction to acquire each user is a very big problem. And the friction of getting a seed phrase and little ledger clicker thing, it's a nightmare, right? So user experience needs to improve just for crypto in general. I think actually the creation of high quality assets that are actually high quality and actually valuable by the RWA crowd is happening, but that's something that can always be better and always be more attractive. Like, what is the underlying of that asset? What is the actual status of that? Why is that more reliable than a TradFi asset, right? What are the guarantees of the RWA Web3 thing versus the TradFi thing? You know, is it better? Why is it better? For the TradFi people, their biggest blocker is just legal. Like, their biggest blocker is legal and compliance, and just the speed and size of their organizations, right? So it's just, does the regulator like this? Oh, you know, the boss's 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 boss went to lunch with the regulator, and the regulator doesn't know what this is, so we're going to wait a year. Okay, sure, let's wait a year. Went to lunch again in a year. The regulator heard about it, but he doesn't feel good. Another year. Another year. Another year. Another year. 10 years later, regulator feels good. Now we launch something. Literally, this is what's going on. So, you know, that's their problem, right? Their problem is this legal? Is it illegal? You know, because they have all these fines, they're super regulated. And then even if it is legal, how quickly can you explain to everybody in the place, you know, someone's been there 20 years, they don't have to listen to anybody about anything. Good luck explaining things to them. It's like a whole big thing. So frankly, their whole thing is like structural legal stuff. You folks have, I think, barriers around making a better thing. But if you can make a better thing, yeah, you can get a significant portion of the early user base of RWAs, but still the vast majority, if you just slice it up by the amount of capital, right, not by individual users, but the amount of capital, the amount of capital will, by all accounts, end up coming from these big firms because they've spent over 100 years aggregating this demand. They're not just going to let it go. What they're going to do is they're going to repurpose it in the way their user base wants, which is going to be the RWA format. So that's, once again, why I'm recommending, yes, make the best product you can, make it at parity or better than TradFi products, because eventually you want the TradFi value, the TradFi TVL, right, the hundreds of trillions in TradFi money to flow into your product. Right? That's what long-term success probably looks like. And near-term success looks like better product in multiple ways that's better than the other products in the RWA space, and ideally better than the products in the TradFi space. I would almost have two lists of user requirements, right? Here's why the product is better than the public chain RWAs that exist. Here's why the product is also better than the TradFi alternatives that exist. And the more green check boxes you get on both of those lists, the better off you're going to be in the near term and in the long term. But once again, it's all very predicated on the idea that they flow their value on chain, which by all accounts, that's finally happening, right? So if you've seen the movie of, hey, banking is coming, they're coming. Well, you know, I'm sorry, like, I'm just telling you it's how it might actually happen, because it's a different world a little bit. I think now it'll actually happen, yeah.
Thank you for that, especially as we kind of conquer each of these barriers and some of the friction that's involved in driving mass adoption. I know we're just about at time, but wanted to close out with just a couple points of in production examples that maybe Chainlink is powering right now that might serve as examples of how some of the more near-term adoption and near-term examples might help to drive some of these use cases.
Sure. So for fund tokenization specifically, last week we went live into production with Fidelity International and a bank in Switzerland called Signum Bank for one of their tokenized funds providing NAV data. And the NAV data, I think, is one of the first pieces of data that's going to be critical to fund tokenization, where Chainlink already has very strong lead and provides it to, I think, some of the best players out there. So fund tokenization and NAV data is live in production. NAV data has real implications for how funds are redeemed, how they work, putting fund administration on chain as part of that whole efficiency thesis. And tokenized funds also clearly have demand in addition to the efficiency benefit, right? So many tokenized funds check both of those boxes of market demand and efficiency, which is kind of the two boxes I would check to define a really good product in the RWA space. And then also proof of reserves. So Chainlink, say, is the largest provider and a very long-running provider of proof of reserves, one of the first for sure, and the most widely used across the largest amount of stablecoin, commodity coin, and various other kind of RWA protocols that need proof of reserves. So that's in production. That's already started to be used by various ETFs, and those ETFs prove the composition through proof of reserves on a more regular basis than they would otherwise. So that performs a kind of risk management function to prove that the assets underlying the ETF actually exist rather than not existing, which would be a big issue for the ETF. So there's this other dimension of risk management and the role proof of reserves plays there. Otherwise, there's a lot of use cases currently in the works around CCIP and basically delivery versus payment transactions and getting real-world assets, tokenized funds, stable coins, even CBDCs to all interact with each other across multiple chains. So the liquidity of these various chains can basically become useful to a specific RWA. Eventually, I think we'll arrive at a world where, just like the internet, it doesn't particularly matter what chain you're on, just like it doesn't matter in the internet what database you're on. Like nobody in the traditional world contacts anyone else and says, what database are you on? I need to do a transaction with you. Right? There's protocols sitting between the databases, and the protocols negotiate all the complexity of whatever technology choice you've made or I've made or anyone's made. So that's what we're going towards. And once that happens, the massive kind of connectivity and the movement of liquidity that comes from that will create a very big boom such that whatever chain you're on, even your own chain, you should have access to all the liquidity. You shouldn't be limited to the liquidity of a specific chain. And that, I think, will supercharge the global nature of blockchains beyond, hey, I'm in this chain, so I can only do this much value from this user base, versus I'm on what we call the Internet of Contracts, and therefore I have access to all the value on all the chains. And that will, I think, accelerate the success of many of these assets. And then some of those chains, some of the more important ones in my opinion, will end up being the bank chains and the traditional private institution chains. And so you really need both of those in one ecosystem because you want, once again, all of that liquidity. You don't just want the liquidity on your chain, you want the liquidity of the whole industry interacting with your asset because that's a big factor for its success. So that's another big category.
Great. Well, Sergey from Chainlink, please give a round of applause. Thank you so much for giving us a glimpse of the future, and I appreciate the time.
Yep, thank you for having me. Good to see you. Thank you.